Chapter 10. It had been 2 good months that Tien Safadisapul, the youngest son of the retired Deputy Commander-in-Chief of the Royal Thai Army, was a volunteer teacher at this Akha village. Time went by peacefully. The simple math he taught the kids had been passed on to their parents who didn't have access to a formal education, and the result was satisfactory. The farmers and ranchers became less susceptible to the tricks of the middlemen once they had learned how to observe the numbers on the scale and to tell if something was off. And even if they were still being taken advantage of here and there, it was a small cost and their livelihood improved quite noticeably. The teacher himself got accustomed to the hardship that had turned into his routine. He walked uphill to the school instead of running on a treadmill. He learned how to eat the simple food he cooked rather than enjoying one in an expensive restaurant. He listened to crickets to fall asleep instead of the music at nightclubs. His body became accustomed to the organ. The fluttered heart became less frequent, except when the tall officer was near. It was something beyond his control. The immunosuppressant he took would run out by New Year, yet if he went downhill to see the doctor in Bangkok, his mother would have taken hold of him and he would never set foot here again. Tian tapped the pen on the desk. He had let the kids go home and had been reviewing the homework alone till evening because the weather was fair. The city boy let out a long sigh and gazed aimlessly at the view outside. Only just 1 month left. He stretched, driving away the tiredness, and rose up to get some fresh air outside. It was late November and the hill's temperature dropped even further that he had to keep his down jacket on all the time. Looking up at the sky, he saw how the light was dimming. 2 familiar small aircraft were flying side by side. Kama Bingley told him it was the good season to make Royal Wing due to the clear sky with sparse clouds. The aircrafts, bestowed by the king, would fly to sprinkle crystals of sodium chloride in a clear sky with the right humidity at the altitude of 7,000 feet to stimulate the precipitation that created the clouds. This was called cloud seeding. As the clouds rose up to the altitude of 10,000 feet, the aircraft would return to drop calcium chloride crystals to feed the clouds. Once they got bigger, 2 aircraft would dash into the clouds, and one would drop sodium chloride crystals on the top of the clouds as the other dropped urea crystals at 45-degree angle. The rain clouds would drop the rainfalls to the ground, and the amount of rain depended on the size of the clouds. Ken inhaled the cool air for a while before returning to the classroom to pack and go home. He nodded to the 2 rangers, the newcomers he'd never seen before, as an apology to keep them waiting for so long. They wouldn't be able to leave their duty unless everyone returned home. He was lucky once again that Kama Bingley's wife had given him the portion of their cooked meals. Even if it was simple and had gone cold, it was still a delicacy for him. After finishing the dinner, he set the kettle on the stove to get a hot bath before the temperature dropped further. The slender form in pajamas, a t-shirt and a football short, rolled around in a soft, wrinkled blanket. He was lying on his elbows as he opened and reread Thorfann's diary that he never got tired of. He didn't know when he fell asleep. The next moment he woke up, his nose was clogged and he couldn't breathe well. He always had this symptom when his allergy kicked in, so he changed his posture and sat up to breathe easier. Yet what he inhaled was smoke that filled in and burned his nostrils. Is there a fire? He sprang up and ran outside to look. Everything appeared normal around his hut, but once he looked intently at the horizon, he saw the white plume of smokes coming up. Must have been a wildfire, he thought, yet his eyebrows knitted as he knew too well such an incident was out of the question. Wildfire would occur once the trees shed their dry leaves, and they piled up until they created a chemical reaction. This area was filled with plantations and wildfire was impossible. Soon, he heard a loud metal bang ringing across the village. The people who were asleep started to rise and came out to shout at one another about what happened. Something's not right. Ian grabbed his flashlight and put on his slippers before running to join the others. He rushed to Kamal Bin Lay, who was grabbing his mat and blanket as his family members were running out of the house. Uncle, what's going on? Bin Lay spun around and got startled to see the teacher. The rough face, with the eyes that had seen the world, shone with worries. His mouth fell open and shut a few times before he could utter a word. There's a fire on the hill. The hill? What's there on the hill? Ken wondered and halted. The almond eyes widened as the realization hit him like a trick. He darted off, not hearing the call that was asking him to stop. The villagers' job now wasn't to stop the fire, but to chase after the young man. The sight of the small school in flame before his eyes made his legs turn to stone. His brain became blank as if someone had erased everything from his mind. All the beautiful memories with the kids in that school. The blackboard he had mastered writing on with white chalks, the textbooks in the cabinet, the paper birds, the paper planes, all were going down in flame. The cold breeze held a piece of white kite paper and plastered it on his leg. He bent down to pick it up, his movements slower than the chaos around him when the villagers and the rangers tried to kill the fire with their mats. The lines drawn with red ink were still visible on the piece of paper. It was the kite with the demon face he had drawn for someone. It was burned, charred, and there was nothing left. The thin hand crunched the paper, and the man darted off through the group of people who tried to stop the fire and stopped at the front. He unshielded the heat and the plume of smokes with his arm as everything was being destroyed in the red-hot flame. Scorched kites made by the students were falling to the ground one by one, and only the ashes remained, and his heart was shattered into pieces. As he was about to run into the classroom, seeing one intact area that the fire hadn't reached yet, two strong arms grabbed and stopped him before the charred bamboo beam fell down on him.
What the hell are you doing?
The captain shouted as Tian struggled in his arms. Not everything is burned down. I'm going to get them out.
Do you want to be burned to death? The beam is falling down.
The captain tried to hold the struggling and screaming young man from risking his life. Use water! This is fire! The clothes and mats won't work! Yan shook violently, but was unable to break free from the strong arms around his waist. His heart was burning, just like how the massive balls of flame were blazing everything down. He dug his nails on the officer's arms, scratching him as he tried to break free from the iron grip, enraged that he couldn't do what he wanted. The loud scream died down into a broken, desperate plea. Let me go! I'm going to take the fucking water! Let me do it if you don't! It's my school! My memory! Even if they couldn't understand his words, it was clear to the villagers who were killing the fire how the volunteer teacher was losing his mind, seeing his precious school burn down. Their eyes welled up in sympathy. The blaze flared up, being fueled by papers and bamboos, and became too big to stop. All they could do was staring at the scene of complete destruction. Yan screamed until his throat was broken. His nostrils and mouth were filled with smokes, and the body that wasn't as healthy as normal people slumped down in the captain's strong embrace. He hit the ground with his fists, furious at his own helplessness as he watched everything burn. Water! All I need is water! He moaned. He knew too well that the closest source of water was still too far away to reach it in time, and yet he couldn't just succumb to this ill fate. His sockets were hot, and all the desperation came out as tears at the corners of his eyes. yet the moisture that fell against his cheek wasn't his. The coolness that washed over his burning cheeks forced him to look up at the darkening sky. It took him a moment to realize what was going on. The wind turned into a squall that he had to shield his face. Despite the flames' ferocity, it couldn't stand against the monsoon that thundered down from the sky. It was 15 minutes that everyone stood stunned around the charred school, unable to move, and just watched the rain that was like a gift from heaven, washing away the nefarious disaster caused by some vicious man. It didn't take long until the fat clouds that carried the rain completed their duties and slowly dispersed into light sprinkles to the soil. The villagers woke up from their reverie and rushed to stop the remaining fire on the remaining wooden frames. Yen wiped the water from his wet face and scrambled up to reach his charred school. He pushed away one burnt log to see what was left, and found out that the cabinet given by a donor that kept textbooks and equipment was half destroyed. The slender form knelt down to pick up the Akka kids' notebooks that were protected inside a strong hardwood cabinet. They were mostly intact, and he picked up the crayons, what was left of the kites, and the ashen paper planes and birds. He was collecting every bit of and piece of his memory. He was grateful that there was something left to keep. Jan scooped up the remains into his arms and held them tight like a madman. His eyes caught sight of a piece of paper that got slightly burned at the corners and was intact. Perhaps it was His Majesty the King's virtue that stopped the ferocious fire. His kindness to us never goes awry. The words of the king's man he had heard not long ago echoed in his mind. The city boy dropped everything in his arm and lurched forward to take the king's image on the calendar he'd put up on the wall and placed it on the remaining cabinet. Royal reign. The initiation of His Majesty the King didn't only save poor people from droughts, but also healed the heart of someone like him who had never appreciated the king's compassion and kindness. Two hands that were full of scrapes lifted up to put the props together in a Y in the middle of his chest. His whole body shook from the uncontrollable sobbing as Tian looked up at the sprinkles of rain that gently touched his face. His lips uttered the words that he'd never thought he'd say. Long, long live the king! Even if his voice was a mere whisper, it stopped everyone in their tracks. The villagers who were taking down the broken and crumbling wooden structures all looked at the teacher, who crouched on the ground in the middle of charred study desks. Suddenly, a man shouted in the same phrase, "Long live the king," in both Thai and the local dialects, followed by others in unison, until the echo of loyalty and gratitude rang across the hills. They all knew at the bottom of their heart that miracle didn't exist, but His Majesty's royal initiatives did exist and spurred the phenomenon. The Aka villagers knelt down to the ground, lifting their hands in a while above their heads and looking up at the sky that still rained down on them. Everyone was overwhelmed with gratefulness, and even the hardened soldiers couldn't stop the tears from welling up in their eyes. As the royal rain turned to drizzles, Papandao villagers and the teacher were carrying the remaining desk with minimal damages to repair. Yan lifted his ash-stained hand to wipe away the tears on his face until it got smeared. He was staring at the damages with resentment in his heart. What had his students done to deserve this? Burning down their school? Then he halted. No, it wasn't the kids, it was him. That master sacked the son of a bitch. The city boy gritted his teeth, furious, and caught a glimpse of an armed force in green uniforms that resembled those of the military, but their berets and the emblems on the chests were clearly different. The border patrols, if he wasn't mistaken. Uncle Bingley once told him that the villagers in the vicinity were under the protection of the military's Pafrapirum base. Yet they worked with the border patrol police to maintain the peace and livelihood of the people. In case of such a critical incident like this arson, the Border Patrol joined in on a manhunt. The investigation started immediately as they canvassed the area. They found three men who had left the nearby village in the previous evening and only returned in the middle of the night. Searching their houses, the patrols found a gallon of gasoline and stained clothes that were hastily buried in the ground. They concluded that the three men had been hired by a magnate to start the fire. The police took the suspects to the crime scene and reported their preliminary investigation to Captain Pupa. The soldiers exclaimed as one young man ran towards the culprits like a hurricane and slammed a kick into the nearest suspect, sending the man to the ground. Before the Lionheart volunteer teacher could attack the next target that was kneeling down, the captain seized him. Tien tried to double-kick the suspect as Pupa dragged him away. "Let me go! Let me kill him!" Tien shouted, his voice filled with resentment.
You're going to be charged for attacking the suspect. You're going to jail instead of being a plaintiff.
Pupa tried to stop the rascal who was struggling and yelling in his arms until the boy calmed down. They looked down at Tien, seeing how he was panting heavily and feeling his body temperature rise. It was unusual, but before he could ask what was wrong, the young man slumped down. The captain turned the limp body and saw that the boy could barely keep his eyes open. He placed his hand on the smooth's forehead and shook his head in exasperation.
You're feverish, you little rascal.
The low, deep whisper next to his ear soothed his taut nerves before darkness finally claimed him. It took the captain a while to give orders to his subordinates so he could carry the teacher from the crime scene. He was heading back to the base in his jeep with a passenger who had passed out to see the doctor before his fever worsened. Two soldiers, who stood guard the barrack entrance, were about to salute as soon as they spotted the headlight, but the jeep didn't even slow down. The medic that had gotten a radio in advance yanked the door open and threw the blanket over the patient before carrying him down to lay on the gurney and took him to the infirmary. The young captain waited on a chair, staring at the partition that stood between him and the sick bed. His physician body had disappeared behind a panel for a while. Pupa was using a towel someone had given him to dry his soggy hair and body when a tall man in military camouflage with a white band and a red cross around his forearm showed up. The captain jumped on his feet and blurted out the question.
How is he doing?
"He has a mild fever with a symptom of pneumonia. I've given him some medication and he should be fine in a few days. I gave him a shot of antipyretic and antiseptic, but Dr. Vasant looked uncomfortable before pulling his friend away from the bed to whisper. I saw an operation scar on his chest."
Right here?
The captain pointed at the middle of his chest. Vasant went silent for a millisecond and nodded. "A vertical scar, some 5 inches. I can tell from my experience that it's a heart operation." Their eyes met in wordless communication. Finally, the doctor let out a long, heavy sigh. "All right, I'll act like I've seen nothing. You take it from here. The patient needs his body cleaned and clothes changed. Is the captain letting the nurse take care of this, or is he going to take the matter in his own hand?" The man who got teased glared at his friend.
I'm taking him home.
Seeing how the tight-lipped officer bent down to scoop the unconscious body up in his arm, Wasant grinned.
You meant your home?
Pupa spun around and gave him a glare that promised punishment, and he rushed out with the patient. The medium-sized base had only one troop stationing with a 30-kilometer patrol radius. The makeshift offices were made of canvases, while the officers' accommodations were wooden houses that were more solid and offered more privacy. The captain gently laid the man in his arms down to the field folding bed so he could take care of Tian, who was soaking wet, and later placed him on a proper mattress. He went to fetch a towel and a new big t-shirt, but as he was pulling the wet one from the unconscious body, the fair skin that greeted him made the man stop in his track. Pupa couldn't stop his eyes from roaming across the smooth chest with two perky brown spots atop of it. He swallowed quickly, trying to pull his mind to the ceiling and taking in a deep breath before taking off the wet tea from the patient's head. He used the towel to dry the thin back until he reached the front again. The 5-inch scar in the middle of Tian's chest made him stop and ponder, thick eyebrows knitted in serious thought. As far as he knew, the boy wasn't that fit and had been ridden with a chronic illness for years. Now, he was getting much better but still under recuperation period. Yet the man he talked to weekly didn't reveal that such illness was relating to the heart. Otherwise, he would have taken better care of him. Rough fingers gently brushed away wet strands from the smooth forehead. Pupa let out a long sigh and hurriedly put on a new t-shirt for the boy. He then looked down at the football shorts Tian was wearing, his eyes following the heel on his torso with heaviness in his heart, and decided to lay a thick and big towel atop the unconscious man before pulling down the shorts and the underwear. He awkwardly put his boxer on the boy, trying his best to not let the beast rein his mind. Once done, he used another towel to dry the boy's hair as Tian started to stare, before swiping big beads of sweat on his forehead. Finally, he scooped the boy up and carried him to the mattress on the floor, and put a thick duvet over him. Pupil looked at the city boy who was drowsy from antipyretics and was snuggling to the pillow, looking docile than usual, and let relief wash over him. It was time to take care of himself. The captain, who let the deputy commander take care of the arson, vanished in the back of the house to take a shower and returned in new clothes. It was 11 at night and the generator that sent electricity to the officers' accommodation stopped working, making the light go down. Pupa walked around the mattress to light the kerosene lamp and dimmed it down to a low flame. He sat down next to the unconscious patient and placed the back of his hand on Tian's forehead and cheek to check the temperature. Luckily, the fever didn't flare up. He was looking at the younger man who had stolen his bed tonight, pondering. As he was about to get up to sleep on the folding bed in front of the bedroom, the slender hand was grabbing on the hem of his t-shirt. The face, with feverish reddened cheeks, was half buried in the pillow, and the pale lips were whispering something so faint he had to crane his ear. "Mom!" The captain couldn't stop his gentle smile and whispered,
I don't want to be your mom. I want to be something else.
the slow responding hum made his grin grow wider. Even if he knew the hum didn't mean anything, the boy didn't let go even as Pupa pried the fingers from his shirt and let out an exasperated sigh.
Still a troublemaker even when you're out.
Giving up his attempt to go away, he lay down on the far end of the mattress and almost fell off. After a while he sensed that something was touching his back. He knew without turning to see who it was, because they were alone in this room. The officer let the intruder move closer until their bodies touched, as the boy snuggled his head against his back. He closed his eyes with an expression of a contented man, unlike other nights. And the clock stopped ticking right at this moment. The thin frame that was curling up under the duvet stared. The sun that streamed through the open window made his eyebrows knitted with frustration. Tian rolled languidly under the blanket, but as he sat up, he had to put his hands over his head as a dull pang shot through his head as if someone just hammered him. The scent of freshly boiled rice made his stomach, that had been empty for more than 10 hours, grumble. He looked around and found out he wasn't in his own hut, and paranoia hit him. His body tensed up as he heard heavy footsteps approaching and making the wooden floor crack. The face that appeared from behind the doors sent calm him down. Pupa was in his clean camouflage uniform and carrying a bowl of boiled rice in his hand. You're up. I asked the kitchen staff to cook soft food for you. Finish your meal so you can take the meds. He dragged a low wooden table to the mattress and put the bowl on it. Ken opened his mouth, trying to say something from his parched throat. I, I'm thirsty. He touched his throat to gesture that he'd lost his voice due to a severe sore throat. Pufa nodded and poured the water from a flask into a stainless steel cup. Sip it slowly. Don't choke yourself. As the patient held the cup with his trembling hands and bowed down to drink, the captain hovered his head over the forehead to gauge the temperature. Ken looked up at him with a fever-ridden, reddened eyes and stared at the officer's dark face, whispering lowly. Is this your place? Yes, and you're in Pa Prapiron Operating Bases Precinct. The captain was feeling generous to give the exact location. The school? Pupa shook his head, knowing full well what the younger man was about to ask. It's gone. It cannot be fixed. My men and the villagers are taking what's left to Kama Bingla's house. The almond eyes became even redder as tears welled up. Was this because of me? It must have been Sakti's vengeance for his rebellious act when he encouraged the villagers to fight against him. The young captain raked his eyes over the boy's face without saying a word. He put his hand on the smooth, thick hair. It wasn't your fault. No one's blaming you. This incident wasn't a mistake, but a lesson. The low, gentle, deep voice that was giving him a stern moral lesson made it impossible for the younger man to stop his tears. Ken couldn't stop his emotions from plunging, as a wise man once said. Once your body is sick, your mind becomes weaker. Pupa moved his hand away, stopping himself from wiping the tears on the troublemaker's cheek, which would be too absurd. He watched the boy rub his eyes with his fingers, saddened that he didn't show Tien how much he cared. Let's eat the boiled rice before it gets cold. Yan nodded, sniffing. Thank you. Even if the praise was out of politeness, it put a smile on the poker handsome face. Don't forget to take the medicines I put here for you. The doc will come to see you at noon. If you're feeling sticky, you can clean your joints with a damp towel. He pointed at a plastic basin with a towel draping over it at the corner of the room. Clean. The words echoed in Tian's head. He slowly looked down at the clothes that weren't his. Don't say that last night. Tian clutched the t-shirt at the middle of his chest where the operation scar was. The thudding heart made him fearful that the other man had found out the truth. The truth that there was someone else hiding in here. The pang in his chest protested his thought, reminding him that his immunosuppressant was in his backpack at his hut. Captain, let me go back to my place. My stuff is there, Tian said with a hoarse voice, watching the officer's reaction with a trembling heart. Pupa remained impassive and impossible to read. He signaled to the closet that held a familiar, colorful backpack. Don't worry, I've already fetched it for you this morning. He pretended not to see how the younger man's eyes grew wider with a shock and went on. Stay here till we make sure you're safe and the investigation is complete. He straightened up to his full height and walked to the door. The officer uttered a final stern command before closing the door. Eat your food. Don't wait around until it rots. Tian jumped and shot him away, having no voice to retort. The door was already shut and the man on the mattress let out a heavy sigh. When he went on to munch on the boiled rice that was getting cold. Later, he stuffed all antibiotics the doc had given him. The city boy got up and swayed before rummaging through his backpack to find his medication bag stuffed under the clothes as usual. It meant that the captain hadn't found out about it, he convinced himself. But it didn't matter. The man said nothing, so he'd act as if nothing happened. Then he froze when a matter of life and death reached his mind. If the captain was the person who had cleaned him and changed his clothes last night, what was more frightening than him seeing this scar was Tian looked down at his crutch with an utter shock. Did you show yourself to him, my precious dragon? Around 1 o'clock in the afternoon, a man in camouflage, like the rest of the men in the camp, showed up, but this one had a band around his forearm, a red cross on a white background, meaning that he was a medical officer. He came up to the accommodation where the patient stayed, unannounced, and Captain Wasant, MD, knocked on the door a few times and opened it without waiting for a response. The slender body that huddled under a duvet, ridden with fever, slowly turned to look at the intruder. The droopy almond eyes were bloodshot because of the high body temperature. Hi, Doc P. Doc Nam, a parched voice greeted almost inaudibly. He looked worse than before. I'm coming to check up on you. The young doctor smiled and opened his handbag to pick an endoscope to examine the throat. Open your mouth and say ah. Ken did as he was told and let out a dry ah. Wazant pressed down the stainless steel tool on his tongue and shone a flashlight to look for about a minute before pulling back. Pharyngitis. Try not to speak and sip warm water regularly. I'm going to give you a double dose of antibiotics. The patient nodded as he watched the doctor put on a stethoscope to check his heart and lungs. Once he realized what the doctor was about to do, he tensed up and made the doctor chuckle. I promise I won't break up your shirt. I can listen through a fabric. The results is no difference. Yet the doctor's words shot paranoia right through Tien. Wasant let out a long sigh as he put on the stethoscope across the younger man's thin chest. It's your right to keep it from everyone, including me. But as a doctor, I'd like to see the medications, please. I want to give you the right drugs without causing any reactions. The sick man dropped his eyes. This has gone out of his hands. He was afraid that his time was ticking. Yan fell into a long silence before lifting a trembling hand to point at the backpack by the wall. The military doctor smiled gently at the younger man's compliance. He got up to look through the backpack until he found a package of medicine tugged at the bottom and read the English names, frowning deeply. How long has it been? Yan pressed his dry lips together and lifted up his hand to signal a number. It drew a loud protest from the doctor. Just 5 months? Wasant put the backpack away and stormed towards the patient with a sour look on his face. Then he remembered to soften his tone. You're not only staying too far away from your doctor, but you're living in this outback. Do you have any idea how much danger you're putting yourself into? He had thought it might have been a balloon angioplasty for coronary artery disease. A balloon angioplasty is a percutaneous transluminal coronary angioplasty, or PTCA. It is a minimally invasive endovascular procedure used to widen narrowed or obstructed arteries or veins, typically to treat arterial atherosclerosis. But once he saw the medicine's name, he realized it was far worse. I have to tell Pooh. He's the one in charge of you, and if something happens to you, it'll be on him. Once he rose, his arm was snatched in a tight grip. The doctor felt the shaky force that tried to stop him from leaving. The younger man's eyes were shone with determination and hard-headedness that he stopped dead in his track. I I beg you. The gasping whisper was forced out of Tien's sore throat. The doctor didn't move for a heartbeat and dropped down to sit on the floor. He pulled the boy's trembling hand and covered it with his hands. I want to know why you're holding so tight to this place. When the answer was only silence, Fazant made his guess. Did you want to become a teacher? Or did you want to try living uphill? This time, the patient shook his head to say no. Don't tell me it was because of food. Despite the reluctant look in his face, the city boy shook his head violently. The doctor, who was also great at catching lies, had a keen sense that he'd narrowed down the possibility and shot the last bullet. Or was it because of Thorfinn? The name of the dead girl that was least expected to come out of the doctor's mouth made Dan's eyes widen. He tried his best to conceal his astonishment by lifting a hand to cover his head and dropped down on the mattress. My head hurts. Roseanne saw how the man was cornered, just slipped from his grip and decided to cut him some slack. All right, get some rest. I'm going to someone to bring you boiled rice in a few hours. Don't forget to take the meds. Seeing the boy nod hurriedly, he quietly backed away from the room, thinking about the conversation that he had pushed him to talk. The doctor felt a heaviness settle in his stomach. If Clutharfon had passed away was a major player in this story, where did his friend stand in this triangle then? The new teacher was bedridden from both the fever and trauma of the school fire for a good 3 days before he got back on his feet again. He noticed that he'd seen less of the captain than when he was living in his own hut. Now, as they were living in the same house, he came to realize how busy the man was. He was occupying both the bedroom and the mattress, but the house owner had to sleep in the folding bed. When the captain went to work, he wasn't up. At night, he fell asleep before the captain came home. Yet he knew that there was a warm, large hand caressing his head in his dreams, as if he was a little boy. He was feeling much better. After talking to a sergeant who delivered him boiled rice and pork and egg in brown sauce, Ken stayed quietly inside the house, alone, until he got sick of it. He rummaged through the bookshelf and found that it was filled with military subjects. He looked through some of them disinterested, but at least it killed his time. It was almost 9 in the evening when the captain returned to the operating base. He thought the sick boy must have had fallen asleep, so he lingered around to talk with his men and the rangers from the Department of Forestry about illegal loggers' arrests. For the past few days, the officials were close to arresting them and had several face-offs, but all they got were minions and not the major players. Pupa walked in the dark until he reached his house. The neon light that was still on made him frown. Intense eyes stared through the darkness at the patio and saw a long shadow cast on the ground. The boy was huddled under a blanket, sitting cross-legged and dozing off with an open book on his lap. He pulled the book from the troublemaker's hand and tapped on him. Why are you sitting in the cold out here? You might get a fever again. Tian rubbed his eyes as he roused, and answer slipped out of his lips without knowing it. I'm waiting for you. Both of them were caught off guard. Then the city boy raised his voice to hide his embarrassment. I'm waiting for you because I have something to ask. You've never been around. But it was too late. The stern face was now plastered with a wide grin. I get it. You're sitting out here in the cold and giving blood to mosquitoes, not being in bed and resting because you have a very important question for me, aren't you? Tian swallowed thickly and nodded, not knowing what the captain was up to. Pupa, who was wearing a green khaki camouflage uniform, sat down, putting one knee up, and leaned in close. You could have just waited inside. Why are you putting yourself into trouble? The words were gentle, but Yen's cheeks reddened because he read between the lines. His hands balled into fists, his mouth opening and closing, and all he did was staring at the captain's wide shoulders as he walked into the house and laughed with himself. Yen pulled out the duvet, frustrated that he couldn't find the right retort. He got up and stomped his feet into the house to rile the captain up some more, but the older man had fetched his loincloth and disappeared into the bathroom as if he read the boy's mind. 15 minutes later, Pupa came out with the loincloth around his waist, revealing his broad, naked, and tanned chest. He bent down to pick some clothes from the closet, feeling some intense stare at his back.
Don't you think I may want some privacy?
Hearing the sarcasm, the boy who sat cross-legged snorted loudly. If you're such a prude, you wouldn't walk in like this.
This is my house, my room.
You were the one who let me stay here. It's mine too.
I gave you the mattress. Or perhaps you want the folding bed outside?
No way! The parched scream of protest made the captain shake his head in exasperation. He's still a kid. Yen scowled, petulant, and his eyes caught the scars across the captain's body. Some were old, some new, fresh stitches that still had a thread on them. Have you fought in a war or something? When Pupa finished putting on track pants under the loincloth, he turned towards the younger man, looking exasperated. Since he'd fallen ill days ago, he wondered if the troublemaker's brain had been killed by some viruses.
I'm a soldier, a country's fence. My job is to fight in a war, right?
He said nonchalantly, as if what he was doing didn't matter that much. He reached towards a medical box on the top of the closet. I know, I just didn't have any idea it could be this perilous. Ian swallowed the word down and slowly crept towards the captain, who had sat down on the floor to tend his wound. The broad, powerful back was speckled with scars from a decade of serving his country. The man who'd lived an opulent life like Yen had never realized how many lives, thousands and tens of thousands, had sacrificed to protect the peace on this land. Yen had once thought it was something that had nothing to do with him, even if his father was a military man himself, yet he didn't serve at the border. That was why the boy only saw only one side of things, how much power his father had and how much comfort tagged along with it when his subordinates were always there to cater to his every whim. A tip of a cool finger gently touched the bruises on the naked back, not waiting for any consent. The captain kept showing up at his place, and it had escaped his mind that someday this man might not have a chance to return. Yen bit his lips hard enough to bleed. He reached around and took a cotton ball soaked with alcohol in his hand, his smooth, fair face stricken with determination. Leave it to me! Upa frowned, bewildered, as to why the boy was shouting as if he was furious.
What's gotten under your skin?
The boy didn't answer, but ordered the commander of the troop to lift his arm so he could tend to the new stitch at the man's flank. He was gentler than the captain had expected. Once he applied betadine, Yen put a gauze over the wound to prevent friction. Betadine is a famous brand of povidone iodine to treat minor cuts and wounds. Why did you choose to become a soldier? Yen finally said. Once again, the captain looked puzzled.
If you want a textbook answer, I'd say because I want to protect and serve my country. For a more personal answer, I'd say this job pays too little, but the welfare is quite nice.
So you're saying you don't have to be a soldier. Other better paid jobs provide better welfare than working for the government. Seeing Tian's solemn eyes, the captain was at a loss for words.
I
You're lying. Pupa rubbed his face, feeling uneasy. but let out a long sigh as he decided to raise a white flag. He started telling his story.
My family, we lived a hard life. My father was a sergeant in an engineering department, while my mom was self employed. Luckily, I was good at school, so I passed an exam to join a school in the city. My dad paid my tuition fee with the military welfare, but it's still a harder life than my peers. As I grew up, I always asked myself why my dad worked in a public service that paid him less than 6,000 baht per month. If he worked as a mechanic in some factories, he'd have been paid nearly 10,000. That meant my life would have been better. But one day, my dad took me up a hill and pointed towards the buildings below. It was the first time I realized how vast this land was. My dad said, my job was to protect this peaceful land. His rank may be small, but his duty was immense. I told myself that I shouldn't be ashamed of him. I should have been proud of him. I couldn't remember what happened in between, but I felt my determination to become like my father didn't go away. The proudest moment in my life was when I was appointed a captain, and I had the sword by myself on the graduation day.
The young captain opened his eyes from the faded memories and lifted his hands to squeeze the thin shoulders of a man who sat across from him.
Now, it's my turn to ask. What's got into you to make you ask about my background?
Tim looked down, avoiding the captain's eyes as he was feeling a myriad of emotions. I was once afraid to die, and I won't be able to face it when the time comes. Aren't you afraid every time you go out there on patrol?
Everyone's afraid of death, Tien.
Pupa's voice was gentler than ever.
I don't have anything left to worry about. My parents are gone. Perhaps this is a good thing. The chiefs never transferred me from the borders ever again.
Even if the last statement was meant to be a joke, Yen didn't feel like laughing. The officer looked at the slender hand that was clutching at the tracking pants and smiled. He leaned in close, so close their noses almost touched.
But if you're worried about me, I promise I'll take better care of myself.
Before Tian could look up, he had to close his eyes because warm lips were touching his forehead in a lingering gentle kiss. The sweet sensation was rushing into his heart, making it thud and hum. He lifted his hand to clutch at his chest as if he was in pain and pressed his reddened face tight against the strong neck with a fresh, clean scent, not knowing what to do. "What a sappy man!" The retort in his ear made the young captain chuckle happily. Perhaps there was no beginning between them, but he wished this moment would last forever. Ken couldn't remember how and when he passed out last night. He recalled vaguely that the captain might have told him to take his pills before bedtime, and then things went black. He woke up again when the sun streamed into the room just like any other day. Yet today, he heard footsteps on the wooden floor and chatting coming from the outside of the bedroom. The man who started to feel better went to brush his teeth and wash his face. When he came out and opened the door, he found that Pupa was talking to his doctor's best buddy. He looked quickly at Dr. Nam, who was grinning widely, and the impassive captain, feeling suspicious, but found nothing wrong. He stepped forward and cut through the conversation. "Are you having a day off, Captain? And you be Doc Nam. You're here so early."
It's not early, Nogyen. It's almost 10.
Ozan teased and got a glare as a response. Before the hothead rascal could attack the cocky doctor, Pupa interrupted to pacify the situation.
I have a day off, so I asked the doc to check up on you. If you've recovered, then it's time to return to the village. The kids said they're missing their teacher.
The word kids made Tian's face darken as he recalled the arson. Even if he did return, there was no more school on the hill and no more teaching and learning tools. "Are the kids sad? There's no school anymore." The captain smiled gently like the night before. He reached out to place his hand over Tien's as if to comfort him.
They'll be sadder if P. Crayon isn't with them.
I want to look at what's left from the fire,
I'll take you there.
Pupa said firmly.
But now, you take a shower. I already made a warm bath for you.
Tien nodded and returned to his room without any words. Dr. Wasan's eyes were widened with shock under the eyeglasses.
You bastard! What kind of witchcraft is this?
The accused man frowned deeply.
What witchcraft? How come your troublemaker is acting so tame? How come such a punk has turned into a Boy Scout?
Pupa lifted his hand to stop his friend after hearing such ridiculous questions.
Shut up. There's no witchcraft or whatever. Things haven't been that bad between us. Yeah, right.
Wazan's drawl was full of disbelief.
Come and help me take the food from the kitchen so we can eat breakfast here. Think you're getting away with it by changing the subject? I might be short sighted, but I'm not blind. I saw how you were holding his hand.
The captain, who was walking down the stairs, stopped in his track. He whipped around to pull the loud-mouthed doctor by his neck before he could say another word. By afternoon, Tian was already packed his bag and returned to his tiny hut. As he walked along the route along with the village that he hadn't seen for many days, the teacher had a feeling that everything was more quiet and lonely than usual when the villagers left to work in the fields. He didn't expect everyone to feel as strongly as he that the only school in the village got burned down. Yet as he saw that everyone was living their lives as if nothing had happened, he couldn't help but feel saddened. What was left of the small wooden school was now charred ruins that were being taken down to clear up space. The volunteer teacher looked at his former office and saw only the sole flagpole, feeling depressed. As he was about to ask the captain where they kept the remaining items rescued from the fire, his ears caught familiar, cheerful laughs from the children. The city boy turned his ashen face towards the noise and saw the little bodies of his students running towards him in a big group, with kites and paper planes that were slightly burned in their hands. On the back were the villagers who he had thought left to work in the plantations. They were carrying the cabinet and the desks that were still usable up the hill. Crew, are you feeling well? We're so worried about you. Tama Bingley, who carried the remaining workbooks, came up to Tian with a big smile. Yes, yes I am. Tian stuttered as he looked at Aka men and women who put the furniture on the ground. I thought you were working at the plantations. He was feeling overwhelmed, he could cry. As soon as the captain told us that you're returning today, we came here to see you. The kids said they missed you every day. But there's no more school. The croaky voice muttered inaudibly as if he couldn't accept the truth. No more school. So, let's build another one. Even if it would be burned down 10 times, we would rebuild it 10 times. We will rebuild it again and again until they get sick of tearing it down. Bingley laughed and tapped the thin shoulder. Don't worry. Even if you're kicking Master Sakta's ass again, we're here for you. The village chief turned to shout in his native dialect to his people as if to rally them. The villagers looked at the teacher and raised their fists up as they shouted in unison. Even if he couldn't understand them, he realized the meaning. Last time, they still warned him about using brute force. The city boy dropped down to a crouching position and covered his face, hiding his emotions. His shoulders were shaking and his eyes were welling up with hot tears. He was grinning from ear to ear as tears streamed down his face. The captain watched as the children thronged in to give their teacher a big hug and couldn't stop smiling. He was happy that he had let Tien leave the barrack and return here, even if he desperately wanted to keep the boy for himself as long as possible. He walked up to Kama Bingley and thanked him.
He'd never experienced such trauma. I think he's feeling much better now. I am really grateful, Kama.
Come on, Captain. This is what we wanted to do in the first place. Pupa pulled a serious face.
About the arson. The police had found the main culprit. It was one of Master Sakta's goons. But even if he was arrested, he insisted that it was personal revenge because Tien had punched him that day.
We all know who's behind the arson, but we can't pin him down. Bingley shook his head, feeling fed up.
Perhaps we can arrest him for other crimes. My informant said that he'd gone from the city. Maybe we'll find him in the forest.
Watch your back, Cap. He has a lot more men out there than we know.
My troop fought them yesterday, but too bad they got away. We can't find their operating base just yet.
If we find something suspicious, we'll tell you right away, the village chief said firmly as he always did. The officer nodded, silently saying that he trusted the matter in the elder's hands. Then he moved to help the others taking away the debris from the charred school. End of chapter 10.